Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It's actually our fourth session of the day, the Future of Retail Customer Engagement 2021 by the Retail Bulletin. If this is the fourth webinar you've attended today, you are on course for your badge for attending all five. If it's the first one you've attended, welcome. You're very welcome to join us as well. I'm Darren, I'll be your moderator for the session. And besides doing things like this, I'm the chairman of Scrubbed, and also Williams Harding Consulting, who works with various clients, mainly in the startup or hospitality world as well. I have got a brilliant panel here with me today. We're going to be talking about customer first mindsets and how that drives long-term omni-channel retail success. I don't really like the term omni-channel myself because I think we think customers use it, but for the purpose of the webinar, it's okay. But I sometimes think beyond the word, and customers think just about brands, not channels, but it's in the title, so I said it anyway. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our panel. A big thank you, firstly, to our sponsor for this session, HappyOrNot, and we have someone from HappyOrNot with us on the panel today as well, but your sponsorship is appreciated. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask everyone to say hello. Steve, in order of the program, I'm going to start with you, please. Who are you, Steve? Tell us about you.
Thank you, Darren. I'm Steve Webster. I'm the e-commerce director for Extra. I'm sure the vast majority of your audience haven't heard of Extra before, but we're actually the largest consumer electronics retailer in the Middle East. We operate in 3 countries. We're in Saudi, Bahrain, and Oman, and I'm joining you today from sunny Bahrain, mainly because we're in lockdown and I can't get out of the country. But my role with Extra is to drive the omni-channel development. So primarily our e-commerce and digital proposition, but tying that into our stores and how we join the store experience with our digital experience.
Where are you at in Bahrain at the moment with regards to lockdown? Are you in the middle of one? Are you coming out of one? How's it working?
We've been fortunate really in Bahrain for a long period of time, but we've seen a spike in cases over the last 2 months. So we went into what we call a mini lockdown about 2 weeks ago, which will last for another 2 weeks. That means that we are relatively free to move. There's just nowhere to go because everything is closed. Right. So all retail, all restaurants, all hospitality, everything is closed apart from supermarkets, pharmacies, and hospitals.
Yeah, similar to the 3 lockdowns that we've had here. We're all seasoned lockdowners now on this panel, and I'm sure with the audience as well. Well, wish you well with it, and thank you for joining the panel today.
My pleasure.
Claire, hello. Tell us about you.
Hi everyone, so my name is Clare Naunton. I'm responsible for customer and stakeholder experience at National Grid. For those of you who may not be familiar with National Grid, we are one of the world's largest investor-owned utilities. We operate in the UK, which is where I'm based, and also in the US. And essentially, we transport gas and electricity on behalf of our customers. My role, I'm responsible for kind of defining what our customer ambition is. And how we make sure as kind of a UK business, we understand how we drive towards that. So what are those transformational activities that means that we do actually kind of deliver for our customers?
Well, you're very welcome on the panel today as well, Claire, and thank you for joining us. Over to you, Susan, who's kindly joined us from being on holiday as well. So really appreciate you taking your time out. Susan, welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. So I'm Susan Connolly. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for Connolly SPAR. We own 3 independent stores. 3rd generation, and my nan and granddad started stores back in 1961, so we're 60 years old this year. And we're based in Wiltshire near Stonehenge.
Excellent. I'm a Wiltshire boy by birth.
Are you?
Yeah, so I was born and bred in Marlborough.
Oh, that's just down the road, yeah.
Yeah, and I grew up with a SPAR. We had a local SPAR in my neighbourhood, and we had a matriarchal lady called Mrs. Marsh, who we all respected and feared in equal droves, who ran the local SPAR. But it was like part of the community, massively importantly. And it's one of those kind of heritage brands that has meant community, I think, over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, and especially in the last 18 months, it's meant to sort of hub the community more than ever before.
Yeah, no, it definitely brings back some fond memories. penny sweets and beyond. But yeah, I spent a lot of my pocket money in SPAR as a kid. But welcome, you're very welcome to be with us, and thank you for joining us. And then over to a representative from our sponsor. Thank you so much. Michele, tell us about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Michele, Customer Success Manager for EMEA at HappyOrNot. So HappyOrNot is the company behind those 4 globally recognized smiley faces that you can hopefully see on my shirt. But I'm sure you've also come across them when you're traveling through airports and retail shops and so on. And so HappyOrNot provides organizations around the world with a quick, easy and instant way to measure and improve their customer experience and employee engagement. So over the years, we've worked with many retailers, including Lidl, IKEA, Boots, and obviously SPAR. We have Susan on the line representing, and many more. So my role as a customer success manager is really to encourage and empower these organizations to use the data, use the feedback to develop and grow their business. So this could be anything from integrating the feedback scores into their bonus schemes, or running internal competitions to motivate employees, identifying quick wins and fixes, but also making those long-term strategic business decisions that are backed by the data. So yeah,
you are very welcome, and I'm loving the merch on. Yeah, you're actually modeling the merch today of the happy or sad buttons. It looks great. But yeah, thank you and welcome to the panel. A rich mix, I'm sure you'll agree, that we have with us this afternoon for our 4th session. So thank you to all of the panelists, and we'll get going very shortly. Don't forget, we do invite your participation as well as the audience. So depending on what device you're using, at the top or the bottom of the screen, you will see a Q&A button. Please do use it. My job as the moderator is to give you the commitment that if you ask a question, it shall be answered. So I'll take care of that for you. So you may have a question for one of these specific panelists on themselves, or you may have a general question that you want me just to put to the panel, and we'll do a fastest buzzer first moment. So yeah, do use the Q&A. Bear in mind, lots of people are speaking from their homes rather than their offices, so there may be uninvited guests, relatives, children's, animals. My dog Scamp is in the background somewhere. She was threatening to start playing with a very loud squeaky hedgehog around me just before we went live. She seems to have disappeared, but she may come back. So for those of you that have watched TRB events before, you know she's a regular visitor. Yeah, all children, animals, relatives, welcome in this new virtual world that we inhabit. Let's get going. Steve, I'm going to come to Bahrain, if I may, first of all, virtually, of course, and get things going around this kind of customer first mindset subject that we're going to talk about today. So customer experience, it's banded around a lot as a phrase and as a strategy, but how do businesses ensure they get customer experience right as a focus across their businesses?
Great question, thank you, Dan. I'm not sure I can answer how businesses get customer experience right, but in terms of getting it as a focus, what we've been very successful in doing in Extra over the last 2 years, and it has been a real change in that 2-year period, is that we've driven from the top down the focus on customer experience. And what do I mean by that? That means that our chairman, our shareholders, our board are focused on customer experience. And that filters down through all of the layers of management. So as a management team, every time we go into a board meeting, into a quarterly review, the first focus is our customer experience measures. Before we start talking about any of the revenue figures, any of the challenges that we may have as a function, the first question that's asked is, what are our customer experience measures? How are we tracking on those? What are the challenges that we've identified in our customer experience? And what are the plans that we have in place to address those issues? So my view is it has to be, if you're truly going to adopt customer experience at the heart of the business, it has to be the primary measure of the business. But ultimately, we're all here to make money for our shareholders and to earn a salary and pay our bills. But by shifting the focus to customer experience in all of those internal meetings, we as a business have significantly improved our customer experience.
The problem with that is, I agree with you, by the way, but the problem I'm hearing about that is getting buy-in from the board or the leadership team about making it the focus. Is that Is that something that you've seen or you've had a challenge with yourself?
We've been very lucky, actually, that the business recognised 2 or 3 years ago that customer experience was going to be one of the key battlegrounds for us. So it's been really a case of pushing against an open door. It might be the nature of our business that a lot of our shareholders and our board members buy from us as consumers, and they're pretty quick to contact me if they have a problem with the website. But alongside that, we're in a market where we have new entrants like Amazon coming into the region, and they pose a real threat for us. And Amazon are known globally for driving customer experience, particularly when it comes to last mile. So as a business, we're aware that that is a threat to us. So getting that adoption of customer experience as a focus for the business was very, very easy for us. Alongside that, the Middle Eastern market it's emerging. It's accelerating much, much faster than any other market I've engaged with previously. But we recognize that there are established retailers who have failed in other markets, and established retailers that have succeeded have had a real focus on their customer experience. So it's been easy for us to learn that lesson.
Thank you for that, Steve. Great, compelling answer to kick us off today. So thank you so much. Take a breather. I will be coming back to you very shortly. Claire, I'm going to come over to you, if I may. Before I ask you this question, just contextualize for the audience customer experience within the national grid. What does that look like?
Yeah, I will do. But I'm going to start actually with a bit of an apology, because I am one of those people that at the minute I've got a situation where I've got a pond which ducklings have just hatched. I have a 4-month-old puppy which is going berserk. So do forgive me if at some point I go on mute and bellow the dog. So it's all kicking off at the minute in my house. So
you've got ducklings and puppies in the same household. How can we not love this? This is amazing. Oh my God,
there's just too much wildlife and things going on today. So no, so it's a great question actually, because I think often when people think about kind of national grid, we are a natural monopoly. So so often in my role I'd get asked the question, so why do customers matter then? And of course they do, because the energy industry is massively changing. Our customers have significantly shifted as we transition towards net zero, and just the increase of renewables. So we are seeing more disruptive technologies coming into the market, and with that is bringing new and different customers. So very much our focus is making sure that it is absolutely vital for national grid success, particularly given the real kind of shift in the market and the environment, to make sure that we understand our customers' needs and we're anticipating them and we're absolutely delivering against them. So we started our focus on our journey really to being a much more customer focused business about 5 years ago. At that time, I think we'd got a very few number of our employees that ever interacted or engaged with a customer, and they were doing the very best job that they could to delight the customers. The challenge they faced is that the machine of National Grid was not geared up to support them, and that's kind of part of what my focus has been over the last couple of years.
And keeping employees engaged on that, how do you do that?
Yeah, and that's been kind of a key part of it. So, we really had to start with some of the basics, which is, kind of who are our customers, why do they matter to us, and starting with the, not the it's Centrica, it's kind of pivot power or the big generators, but making them real. So who is it within those organisations? Well, actually it's Joe, and we've got kind of Fred, who's the farmer who's trying to build a wind farm and needs to connect to the grid. So trying to make it real. Absolutely critical to that was making sure, as kind of Steve said, that some of this started at the top. So we first of all got all of our exec out talking and listening to customers, and then bringing those stories back into the organisation, which is, I saw a customer, this is what they said, this is how it made me feel, and this is what I want to do. And powerfully, we got the whole of the exec out talking. So the HR director, the IT director, and they heard that actually some of the things that we were doing in HR around developing our staff and rotating them around was causing real issues and real pain points for those customers. So what we were able to do is start to develop stories that we could then share with employees on actually customer experience, and delighting our customers is not just the responsibility of the front line. All of us play our part in that. And that's kind of the narrative that we started to shift. I think what made the biggest impact, as well as that kind of big awareness piece, was we introduced something called Colleague Net Promoter Score, which is very similar to NPS, which I'm sure all of us know and love. And we started to measure the internal effectiveness of some of those internal processes. So, you know, kind of where was it working well, and where did we have a load of pain? Because what we were doing to our customers, we were doing to our own employees. And we started to focus on actually how did we first of all understand what those pain points were, and then how could we drive change and drive cross-functional working to really start to address some of those. And that shift between kind of essentially making it real. We went from an NPS in some areas of -60 to, you know, to kind of to plus 20, 13, and some areas are kind of now at kind of a plus 60. So I think that internal colleague net promoter score really helped to get everybody involved in, even if they were several steps removed from a customer, what could they do to improve their internal service provision, which would ultimately drive an improvement for the customer.
Thanks for that. And Steve's just actually added to your point in the chat behind the scenes, saying that those customer stories are a really great way to get exec buy-in as well. Thank you for that. By the way, if we hear woofs and quacks, we are completely happy, so don't feel the need to go on mute, but thank you for your contributions so far. Susan, I'm going to come to you if I may. Your stores, how has being customer-centric impacted the stores that you're responsible for?
So like everybody else's business, our customers are at the center of everything we do. Without our customers, we aren't in business. So we have to put them at the focus point of our strategies. It's been a great way of, obviously happy or not, and using the feedback from the customers has been able to drive our business forward in different directions possibly that we wouldn't have thought about before. So one example is, obviously I use Happy or Not. I haven't changed my question. I started using Happy or Not in 2014. I haven't changed my question. So the question is, how is your customer service today? It's on the exit point. So once you've been served, you go out the door, it's on the exit point. And it has been offered to me a few times to change my question, but I daren't change my question. We do get a few reds because customers sometimes look at how they're feeling, but on the majority, we run at a 96% happiness rate of our customers. And it just reiterates that we know we're doing it right. We've got availability, we've got nice, friendly staff, but we do get reds. And when I get a weekly report, so it's all emailed to me weekly. And as soon as I see a drop off below 90%, I go into panic mode because it's really unheard of for us to get there. But I can then identify and still what's going wrong and change it.
And I guess when you get those reds, it's kind of like it means something has happened in store and you can kind of jump on it quite quickly, yeah?
Yeah, so I can give you an example. So on Friday afternoons, I think it's between 4 and 7, it was just red, completely red throughout the afternoon, to which just drives me into, oh my gosh, what's going wrong? And after looking at the CCTV and marrying up the times, because obviously Happy or Not tell you the times and how many presses were red, it appeared that we were far too busy and we didn't have enough people on the tills and not serving them quick enough. So as a result of that, we then hired more staff to work on the tills and we invested in headsets. So as soon as the member of staff surfing feels as though they need some help, they just press their headset, ask for somebody to come and help them, and then that speeds up the queue. And our reds have now disappeared on a Friday afternoon.
Good
work. So it's amazing the impact. Another one I can think of is milk. Our fridge went down and we do check our temperatures 3 times a day, but it had obviously gone down in between the 2 times of checking. So people bringing back their milk because it is warm and it has really gone off. And when they were bringing it back, they were pressing the red button. So again, I take to my CCTV, see what was going on in store. And so now we do checks more regularly on the chiller, because when people were bringing back their warm milk, obviously they weren't happy and were pressing the red ones. So it's amazing how you can see what's going in store from pressing one of the 4 buttons. They don't say anything, it is just a face, but actually I can gauge what's going on in my stores without even being there.
So don't mess with the UK customer and their milk, huh? That's like the household staple that we need to have right.
Get them served quickly and give them some fresh milk.
Yeah, I have to keep like a supply of milk, because if I get low on what I call my cut-off point, I start to freak out that there's not enough milk in my fridge. It's one of those things you just have to have in your life always. So I can see that milk could drive red scores for sure. That's really interesting examples. Thank you. I'll come back to you again shortly as well. Michele, let's hear from you at HappyOrNot then. So Susan at SPAR has just given a brilliant example of how she works with you, but how are retailers using HappyOrNot? Is it just a wide range of usage?
Yeah. So Susan's example was brilliant, like best practice, I would say. But we believe that retailers really benefit the most when they give a voice to their customers, like wherever they are. So whether that's in store or online. And what our solution does is it provides various different ways for people to leave that feedback. So that could be via the physical smileys that Susan mentioned. And so we have different types of physical smileys. We also have virtual ones now. So an example from one of our other clients, a Nordic sports retailer, XXL. So what they're doing is they're collecting feedback using our physical terminals in 91 stores across 4 countries. But they're also using our virtual smileys to collect feedback from other touch points within their online store, their delivery service, and their customer support centres. So what this means is they have this like unique omnichannel view of how their customers feel at every touch point. So that means that they can identify trends, they can optimise their operations, and they can ensure that there's a consistent customer experience, whether the customer visits a store, visits the online store, gets a delivery, emails their service centre, and so on. So we really see it as like looking at the bigger picture.
It's a great example, and it must be very satisfying to have a client on the panel who gives such real-time examples of how it can impact the store as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. So Susan's example is absolutely perfect, best practice.
Excellent, thank you. Right, we are through the first round of questions. We have no questions from the audience yet, that's fine. The good news, panel, is that our audience is staying with us. So whatever you're saying so far is good. They haven't left us, so good work, well done, 5 stars. Steve, I'm going to come back to you, if I may, in Bahrain. I know you said you were having some connection issues, but stick with it and see where we go.
Okay.
I'm hearing a lot, and I think we all experience this as consumers as well, that sometimes the disconnect between a brand's store and a brand's online experience is quite a big void. Some brands do it really well, others do it really poorly. How do you align measures for CX across stores and online to try and stop that obvious gap that some brands suffer from?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. There's a lot of disparities between online and physical retail, and it's certainly something that we've been guilty of historically, and even now occasionally are. The approach that we've taken is relatively simple, I like to think, which is we have consistent measures. So if we're following up with a customer post-purchase or post-visit with NPS or customer satisfaction, we word all of those communications the same way, whether they've been in store or they've been online. So what that gives us is a consistency in the measure, in the response from the customer. And it's taken a lot of time to tweak those messages to make sure they are relevant for both the online customer and the offline customer. And then we bring all of that data into a central pool and identify the last touch point that the customer had. So if the last touch point was home delivery from an online shopping experience, or the NPS survey was given to the customer on a bounce out from the website, or the last transaction was in store, we then apportion that response to that owner. And then every owner has a direct channel into all of the other channels, if that makes sense. So as the owner of the e-commerce experience, I have a direct channel into my store colleagues. So some of my NPS responses relate to a collect from store experience. Some of my responses relate to home delivery. Some of them relate to our contact center, and then all the other various touch points. Because we're bringing all of that data into a single central pool, and we're using the same measures from the same questions, we can then separate those out into the not responsible channel, but the channel that has the underlying ownership of the customer experience. So whether it's a positive or a negative experience with our home delivery, the online customer has indicated they're happy or unhappy. I know the last touch point was with our home delivery colleagues. Equally, coming back to the same root cause.
We lost you in the last 10 seconds, Steve. Your audio has been perfect until the last 10 seconds. We did lose your video is frozen, unfortunately, which is fine. We can live with that one, but your audio was fine up to the last 10 seconds. Just in case we missed the last point.
Sure. So I was at the point where I was waffling, Darren, so that's probably an audience-triggered response. Fundamentally, what it comes down to is we centralize the data, we align the data with the last touch point the customer has had, and then we follow up with the customer as well. So while we get the quick NPS score, we do ask the customer to give us a reason. We then mine that data and then feed it through to the final touch point, whether it's customer service, last mile delivery, collect from store counter, store colleagues, or the website. And we aggregate all of that data, and it's down to the responsible parties within the business to bring that back to the table to identify any root cause issues or to push the things that are working well for the customer. Well, that didn't sound like waffle to me, Steve. So that sounded like pretty compelling content. So thank you very much. Bless you, Darren. Thank you. Claire, coming back to you over in Duck and Puppy Central. What we mentioned about those engaging employees on the importance of customer experience, but what have been the biggest challenges or hurdles in actually delivering that? And what opportunities have you found as a result?
Yeah, thank you. And kind of a great question there. I think in terms of the challenges, something which, is kind of, I think particularly when you're from kind of the CX background and you're something that you're really kind of passionate about, is when you kind of come across people that maybe don't share that same passion, are slightly more kind of reticent. And certainly what we found is that a number of our senior leaders were reluctant to go out and kind of listen to customers. We found, I talked about kind of colleague NPS and how we rolled it out and made it sound very smooth and simple. We had a number of people that, again, were very reluctant because they didn't like the spotlight that it shone on their business and thought that there might be kind of the finger of blame pointed in terms of anything which highlighted anything which kind of could show, pain points or potentially kind of poor performance. So we had to do an awful lot with that senior leadership team to make them feel comfortable and make them not be fearful of either meeting customers or what this data showed us, because this was kind of rich material, and from that we could then build and do something with it. So it was important that we helped people overcome that fear and kind of whatever was driving it. And certainly found then that it's kind of classic large organizations, there's an awful lot of noise, there's an awful lot of kind of other messages where you're all trying to kind of compete. So it kind of goes back to what Steve was saying at the very start, that it's absolutely critical that you have that support and buy-in from the very top of your organization that can drive through that and kind of help you kind of navigate through some of those obstacles. So that real consistency of voice in terms of this is something that really matters. And then be very supportive in terms of how you enable people to kind of to move through that was absolutely critical for us. And then I suppose in terms of some of the opportunities, by focusing on what some of those employee experience pain points were and kind of removing some of the treacle and some of the things that were difficult and hard to do, we saw that employee engagement significantly, shot up, which was great. We also saw then that by, making some of those internal processes much slicker, we're also able to see that improvement, importantly, in our kind of customer experience. And we also saw that kind of customer satisfaction, NPS, also went through the roof. So we're able to start showing that kind of real positive momentum, that it didn't have to be perfect, but we had to listen, we had to learn, we had to embrace this. And as soon as we started to get more of those, those success stories, those things that people could be proud of, that really helped kind of to build that forward momentum, to start creating even more. So I think, yeah, that was probably kind of critical to us.
Yeah, that leadership team buy-in piece is just so vital, isn't it? And it's astonishing that I still talk to businesses who struggle to achieve that, and there's some block somewhere at board level that hasn't sort of quite understood the importance of this still, or doesn't get it. And it seems crazy, really, that would be even a debate in this day and age that we live in, where consumers and customers just have so much more power than they ever did, and can vote with their feet, quite simply. Thank you. It's very peaceful where you are, Claire. You had nothing to worry about, see?
Don't tempt fate. It's all going to go wrong now.
I've said that now. My dog's going to come storming in any second as well. Thank you so much. Susan, coming back to you. So you've been working with HappyOrNot since 2014, but take me back to the beginning. So why did you originally decide to start collecting feedback in this way?
It was surely by accident. Obviously, we've always put the customer at the heart of everything we do, but we had no measurable way of gauging how our customers felt. So myself and my father went to a technology showcase in London, and we stumbled upon HappyOrNot. And I think at the time it was just very sort of forward thinking. We weren't aware of any sort of retail stores like us that were doing it. And so we thought we'd take a chance and do it. And never ever did I think that I would get the response and information I could from pressing a button. I completely underestimated the power of the press of the button. And now it won't leave my shop. I'll have it for many more years to come. So our stores are inspected weekly by myself and my father, and their HappyOrNot score now goes in with their wastage figures, their basket spend figures. And it's almost turned into a competition between the stores, because they all want the top HappyOrNot, top sort of #1 spot for that week. And if something goes wrong or they haven't got many staff, they all know they're not going to get it. So I can use it to drive in-store teams. It's built into their inspection, and it almost drives store standards, because they have to have the availability, they have to have the staff available, they have to have the customer service ready, packaged for whatever that customer needs, because they need to make sure. I mean, even in lockdown, I think I was quite surprised. I thought the number of presses would go down because people wouldn't press the surface. Now we have got an antibacterial surface on there, but the presses haven't been affected. In fact, they went up during lockdown, because it was a great way of giving immediate feedback to our staff to say, thanks, you're doing a great job, we sort of almost appreciate it here. So actually the presses went up during lockdown. By all means, we did social distancing, we did everything the government said, but you didn't have to queue outside the bigger malts. In our stores, we had someone on the door controlling how many people were in. So yeah, actually the presses went up in lockdown, which I really didn't think they would. But it's a good way of feeding back to the store teams, not just the managers, that actually all that hard work you've been doing. I mean, we weighed flour and we were rationing toilet rolls, and actually it's a great way of feeding back to the store teams, not just management. Actually, do you know what, you're doing a great job and people are appreciating what you do.
So you got slammed with all your stores being cleared out in that crazy few weeks before lockdown, yeah?
Yeah, yes and no. We kind of saw it happening up north before we did down here.
Right.
So we were almost ahead of the trend. So we saw it coming. So we were buying 25 kilos of bags of flour and weighing them out for our customers in kilos. So everybody got some. The same as eggs. We were buying trays of 30 eggs, and literally it was like wartime. It was like rationing them. So everybody got some.
Wow.
Yeah, we did everything. We even started free home delivery. We did absolutely everything we could.
So all sort of takes us back to a bygone age, but would have been so appreciated by the community as well.
Yeah, obviously, because there was a lot of elderly people that couldn't come out. And yes, there is lots of apps, and we do have an app and sort of online, but actually the older customers just like picking up the phone. But then the longer the lockdown went on, the longer they were talking to us on the phone, because they haven't seen anybody, and we were the contact with the outside world. So but yeah, it was tough. But yeah, HappyOrNot, we never ever envisaged the success we get from HappyOrNot, ever.
So in terms of working with HappyOrNot, you were essentially already customer centric, but you had no way of knowing how your customers felt.
Yeah.
And this system gave you sort of a simple mechanism to find out.
And it was instant. There's no when, do you know what I mean? There is other bits to it, but ours is instant there and then. You don't have to go onto the website, you don't have to do anything. Literally on the way out, you just press the button on the way out. So it is an instant way. And so yeah, we're still sort of getting 2,000, and we have the same question, like I said, for 7 years now, and we're still getting 2,000 presses a week.
It's very impressive. It means your customers want to tell you as well, which is a nice level of engagement as well.
Yeah, it's almost part of their routine now, a part of the shopping experience. The terminal hasn't moved place, the question, and that's the same customers coming in every day, and yet they're still pressing that terminal every single day. So yeah, it's just, we've just built into their shopping experience now. So yeah,
it's a great example, and I love the fact that you were selling bags of flour and eggs in singles as well. That's a great story. Michele, coming back to you at HappyOrNot, I mean, the pandemic, wow, we've all been through it over the last 18 months. Have you seen sort of the feedback tonality being affected by what everyone's been through?
Yeah, we have actually. So during the pandemic, we did a lot of analysis on our data to see kind of what was happening. And one of the notable shifts we found across all markets, so US, UK and Europe, we found that consumers on average were actually happier during the pandemic. And we found this is because they were happy that the stores were open again, and they were leaving much more appreciative feedback to their retailers than prior to the pandemic. So an example was with our client Elkshop, who are part of the Dixon's car phone group. They're a Nordics electronics company. So they saw a peak in positive feedback during the first pandemic wave. So they had to kind of look into this further, and they found that customers were praising them for taking all of the necessary measures to allow them to shop safely there again. So they were really appreciative that this retailer had gone to all the measures that they could to allow them to shop again. And what this kind of positive feedback is, it's really invaluable because it just boosts employee morale. So if you're showing that data to the employees, it gives them motivation basically, and in turn it can impact positively on the customer service that they then give to the customers, because if they're happy and they're being praised, then it kind of like a cycle, positive cycle. So yeah, that's an interesting trend that we've seen.
It's a really great example. I mean, taking this a step further, I mean, how do you see it developing? You know, the pandemic is still with us for now. What's your foresight of how this is going to develop and how feedback will continue to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's also interesting is our data, kind of mirroring what Susan just said. Our data has shown that during the pandemic and now that the feedback rates haven't decreased. So in some circumstances, like with SPAR, they've actually increased. But the rates of feedback have stayed the same, which really shows that that people want to give feedback, and they want to give feedback more than ever. So whether that's via touching a device in a store, in a physical store, or if that's using a QR code or going online, the customers really want to speak to the organizations, and they want to give them feedback. So we see a lot of positive things coming and carrying on, that people do want to keep continuing to give feedback, and they will do as long as they're given that chance.
It's really encouraging, isn't it, to sort of hear about that relationship of a customer wanting to tell a retailer how they're doing as well, because that is genuinely how a retailer gets better, by understanding how people are feeling about the experience. So there's been some really great examples there. Thank you. We are already 40 minutes into this webinar. It is flying by. Webinars normally last somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes with the TRB. So we are flying through the content. We've had no questions in yet today, but we still have the audience. So we're not just talking to ourselves, which is really good to know. So what I will probably start to do soon is to bring the panel session to an initial close. So if you do want to get some questions, now is the time to use that Q&A button to get it out there. Steve, you're still frozen, sir. So I'm going to make a suggestion that you turn your camera off, which may boost your audio on the signal. And then we can come to you for the final question. There we go. You're what's that fan? The Anfield.
Fourth generation, Darren. It wasn't a choice in my household.
It was just like, you are going to be a Liverpool fan, and that's it, right? Okay. Fine.
That's it. Yep.
I was dragged along to Swindon Town matches against my will when I was a kid as well. So
against anyone's will, I'm sure.
Yeah, I didn't sustain the fandom when I was old enough to make my own decisions, but there you go. Steve, I'm going to come to you for a closing question for you, sir. So hopefully your audio will be stronger with your video off. Continuing that theme around we spoke about before, that kind of aligning measures between CX, stores and online. Who's good at it? Who would be someone that you would say is someone that you admire as a consumer or within the industry that's really good at that kind of frictionless, any channel experience?
That's a tough question. Because of the nature of what I do, Darren, most of the people I look at tend to be pure play. And there's one business that is starting to venture into an element of physical retail, which is AO.com in the UK. And there's a great story that actually harks back to one of the earlier points about getting exec buy-in. In the very early days of appliances online, when they were transitioning to become AO.com, one of the senior management team went out and brought in a usability business that I'm familiar with, based in Manchester, and tasked them with finding out what their customers really thought of them. So they spent weeks and weeks interviewing customers, doing vox pops, and doing site reviews with them. And that was all collated into 8 hours of video. And every manager in the business had to commit to watching all 8 hours of that video. And that was really the kernel that started off their obsession with customer experience. I describe them as omnichannel. They have obviously the collect from warehouse, but I think one of the things that AO do very well is they get their customer experience right up front in terms of the website look, feel, and usability, but they do an incredibly good job in managing the customer experience in the last mile as well. I think it's a really good. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant example. And if you don't know the story of AO.com, the guy behind it is a guy called John Roberts, actually. And I've had the pleasure of meeting John many times through my work at Retail Week. And he's a star, you know, and the culture and the mindset of the business comes from John as the founder. I think he won Retail Leader of the Year last year as well. So it's a really good case study of kind of that seamless customer experience. So yeah, brilliant example, Steve. Steve, I hope lockdown life is not too more painful for you in Bahrain. Thank you for being on the panel with us today and for your contribution. Thank you, Darren. And hopefully we can work together again. Claire, I'm going to come over to you for your closing questions. Because of the nature of National Grid, it's hard to define, you know, who the customers are, because you've got lots of customers effectively, right? Like you said, you are in a sense a monopoly in some ways, yeah? How do you, or is there a way that National Grid can have advocates, or is it just impossible?
Do you know what? Thank you for asking that, actually, because it's I was kind of conscious when you asked me the context question up front. I probably could have explained it a little bit better, but I suppose how we see it, we've got an awful lot of really important stakeholders that are absolutely critical to our business, and you know, some of those absolutely we're looking to see how can we partner with them, how can we co-create, how can they become our advocates. So absolutely, I think we kind of view that there are all sorts of kind of really critical stakeholders to our business. How we define customers within that who are the people, who's that slice within all of those stakeholders are the ones that actually pay us money. And that's kind of who we view as kind of our customers. But in terms of how we think about, you know, how do we deliver some of the challenges around net zero, then it's really important that we consider all of those stakeholders that are actually kind of critical to how collectively we need to work quite differently across industry to drive towards that. So, those other stakeholders are absolutely vital.
Thank you so much. And thanks for your contribution to the panel. And by the way, as we've all got each other's email address behind the scenes on the panel, we need puppy pictures and duckling pictures as well, please.
Absolutely, have to share. They're very cute, the ducks, I must say.
I'm sure. I was admiring all of the I'm not sure what do you call a baby geese? What, have they got a name, right? They must have. I don't know, but there was baby geese with their parents, and then there was the cygnets with the swans, and it was all wonderful over in St James's Park yesterday. So it's definitely cute season, isn't it? For sure. Gosling, thank you, Steve. There you go, Gosling. I knew baby geese was not the right thing, but Claire, thank you, and for your contribution today as well. Susan, coming over to you for your closing contribution. Community grocery, such a important part of life before the pandemic, and the examples you gave underlined, I think, why it became even more important, and indeed a lifeline actually, during the pandemic. What have you learned about your customers besides the work you do with HappyOrNot? Is there anything else that you've learned during the pandemic that surprised you about your customers, or the way that you run your stores is now going to be changed forever? Is there anything that's sort of silver lining that's come out of this difficult time?
You have to stay relevant. So we changed the way we run our stores during the pandemic. We hired about 20 extra people as a night team to come in and stock up at night time, because there simply wasn't the time or the space to do it in the day. But we're always looking at future-proofing the business. So for us, COVID was a really good thing business-wise. We managed to retain 27% of the customers we gained during COVID. So we've invested that in the business. So we've got panic buttons for the staff now. We've got smoke screens. So because of the feedback we get from customers, and we know they're coming back, we're doing a good job. We've looked at the security side of things. So installed a smoke screen. We've just put in £10,000 of CCTV with facial recognition. So gauging the customer's feedback and knowing we're getting one area right, we can then expand another area. And it's just about keeping relevant, moving forward and future-proofing the business, because we can't take our foot off the gas. Yes, we did the hard work in lockdown, and now we're coming to the end. It's still going. We still have to improve. We haven't mastered it yet. But yeah, we definitely during lockdown, customers listened to them. We increased our ranges. So we now do gluten-free, we do plant-based. Baking was a huge section that sort of doubled in size because everybody was home baking. It was cheap to do with children, but that now has reverted back down to its original size. So it's about being relevant, taking the data you've got and just keep future-proofing and investing in the business. It's the only way you can survive.
And by the sounds of it, being agile between the categories. So some categories get bigger, some get smaller, and it just keeps evolving.
Yeah, it's forever evolving. Yeah,
I've said consistently throughout the pandemic that I think anyone that's behind the leadership of any food business deserves a massive gratitude of thanks. I mean, I think food stores, grocery stores just got slammed from nowhere and, literally fed the nation. So
we did. And I appreciate your words, but we were just doing the same job as we were doing before the pandemic. I know it sounds weird. It was highlighted because people couldn't go out of town to the big stores. People actually realized, I think, what we do. So we didn't really do anything different apart from even more customer focused. But yeah, we weren't doing anything different. We were doing this before the pandemic. It's just more people realized, I think.
Do you know what I found personally was it reminded me of the importance of local. So I live in central London, but I was, as a typical go to the supermarket and try do everything type guy. And then what the pandemic forced me to do was I started looking at things that I just completely missed under my nose. So going to an independent butcher, going to a greengrocer, that kind of thing. And I enjoyed it because it was an activity that was allowed to be done during lockdown, but actually discovered new things about my local area. I just never even took the blinkers off and saw. So I think community was added to all of that as well. But I'm going to say thank you to you anyway, because food grocers deserve a vote. And thank you to you personally for coming on to our panel today as well, Susan. Michele, it's over to you to wrap this up as our sponsor actually as well. I'd like to know really how feedback helps store operations exactly. Close off with those thoughts, please.
Yeah, sure. So I can give you a couple of examples of the way that our retailers are using the data to improve operations. So for example, recently we had a food chain we were working with that noticed that one of their their locations was receiving really negative feedback on a specific time of the morning. And that pattern wasn't seen in any other locations, so it was just this one. So once they'd investigated, they realized it was because in this specific location, the kitchen staff were still preparing the food at that time. So there wasn't enough staff on the tills basically to serve the customers. So they simply added more staff in the kitchen and on the tills. And as a result, they saw that the customer feedback data much more positive and in line with the other locations. And then, yeah, another example is from another retailer who they noticed from their feedback that customers were selecting the option that they were not happy because of the product availability. And they noticed this was an issue just in one store out of like 90 stores. So they thought that it seemed strange because every store should be consistent with the types of products that they have. So they investigated it again, and they found that actually the issue was to do with the staff in this specific store. They hadn't had the training on how to offer an alternative product when something was out of stock. So they trained their staff, and after that they found that the score then went up and that the customers were no longer complaining about the product availability. So like without this data, they probably wouldn't have known that because it's quite complicated, and they wouldn't have been able to improve or drive change from the top. So that's just a couple of examples of how the operations are using it. But it's basically they look at the data and they can find the pain points, and then they can drive that change, which they wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
Thank you so much. And that's a brilliant way to wrap things up as our sponsor as well. So thank you to you and HappyOrNot for sponsoring this session. That's a wrap, folks, of the fourth session of the day, webinar number 3, but it is actually the fourth session after our opening fireside this morning. Next up, we have our final session of the day, customer journey management. We've got a brilliant panel joining me for that as well. And that kicks off at 4 o'clock today. So don't forget to join us for that. All that leaves me to say now is a massive thank you again to Steve and Susan, Michele and Claire. What a panel. Thank you so much for your compelling content. You've really done a brilliant job and you held the audience with us. Thanks for sticking with us, and I wish you all a great rest of your Thursday. Cheers.
Thank you.